Hey guys, what's going on? So today I'm going to be attempting to install a coil unplug kit. So yeah, the kit I decided to go with is the Fab 9. They make a kit for the Miata that works for various years. I figured they were the easiest route rather than trying to assemble a kit myself. Alright, so here is the entire Fab 9 kit. Comes with these Denso pencil coils. Most Miata kits use the Toyota coils. According to Fab 9, the Toyota coils aren't much better than the factory Miata coils, or in my case the Escort coil. I would probably be, me in my situation with my vehicle, I would probably see benefit from the Toyota coils because the Miata runs 2 to 4 coils. Whereas the Escort runs a single coil and a distributor. So basically that coil in the Escort is doing twice as much work as it would be doing in the Miata because it's, you know, it's firing on every single rotation of the crank, whereas with the Miata you've got the 2 coils that are alternating. So anyways, yeah. So these really nifty Denso pencil coils, really slick looking. You don't need a retention plate for these. Because this little O-ring fits right inside the spark plug socket in the valve cover. So these are self-supporting. You don't need a retention plate. So comes with those. Comes with a set of Denso Iridium Power plugs. When you order it, you get to select your heat range. They have, I think, like 3 different heat ranges, like your standard naturally aspirated, boosted under 16 psi, and boosted over 16 psi. I want to say these are probably like 2 to 3 heat ranges colder, maybe even 4. I don't know. I have to look it up. Denso's heat range ranking is confusing as hell to me. I don't quite understand it. So anyways, colder plugs. These actually kind of make the kit worth it just by themselves. I mean, these plugs, I mean, they're like $8 or $9 a piece, you know. You know, you're talking, you know, $40 after tax for plugs, and these are just kind of thrown in. Like I said, one of the main reasons why I decided to go with their kit, with Fab 9's kit, as opposed to building my own. I mean, just the plugs make it worth it just by itself. So the other thing that comes is their ignition driver. This is, I want to say it's proprietary. It's kind of proprietary. There's no markings on it. It's their design. It was designed for them, or it was spec'd for them for their application, is what they say on their website anyways. So another thing why I went with their kit as opposed to building my own, you know, sourcing this part just makes it easy. They already did the work. So obviously it comes with the harness that plugs in to all the coils, and then a second pigtail to connect to your factory harness. If this was a plug-and-play kit, there'd obviously be a plug on the end of this, and this would just plug into your factory harness, and you put your spark plugs in, you put your coils in, you plug it in, and you'd go. Everything would work. Well, you'd probably have to change some settings in your ECM, some dwell times and some dwell settings and stuff in your ECM, but otherwise it should just plug and go. You know, plug and play, as they say. Comes with some instructions for various years. These are basically worthless to me because obviously this is not going to a Miata. So yeah. I guess it's not completely worthless, but for the most part it's worthless. So this kit is for the 1990 to 94, I believe. 90 to 97, I guess. Okay, 90 to 97. These are wired in a wasted spark configuration, and what wasted spark means is that there is... So basically what wasted spark is the way this is wired is it will fire coils 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 at the same time. So 1 and 4 will fire, and then 2 and 3 will fire at the same time. So while 1's on the power stroke, 4 will be on the exhaust stroke, at the top of the exhaust stroke when that spark plug will fire. Hence the terminology wasted spark. The spark is going to waste. All right, so basically the benefit to Wasted Spark is simplicity. It just makes wiring a lot easier. I do have Mega Squirt on the car, and if I were to modify the unit, I could do a sequential spark, but there's really not a whole lot of benefit as far as I understand. Maybe if I had a more advanced Mega Squirt unit that could do something like a true anti-lag or something, but yeah, that's just not something I need for drag racing. So yeah, basically the way the Mega Squirt is wired now, it has 2 ignition out drivers. So that's perfect. One thing I'm going to have to do with my setup, only since the original harness for the vehicle is set up to run 1 coil, there's only 1 ignition output running from the ECM. It's not a big deal. I had a spare harness, and I went ahead and I pulled the pin from that spare harness. There we go. I went ahead and pulled the pin from a spare harness with a little bit of wire lead on there. This way I can slide this into this. That way I can go ahead, I can slide this into the ECM in the correct spot for the second ignition output and run a wire to this guy. So that would be the plan for that. But yeah, if you were doing this on a Miata, this would be pretty much plug and play. It wouldn't be too difficult to set up and get going. Overall, the assembly of the kit looks pretty nice. It's what the fuck is that? Everything's nice and sleeved and, you know, heat shrink in places. I personally would have sleeved these all the way up to the plug. You know, I just think that looks kind of, I don't want to say it looks sloppy, but, you know, I'm just saying I would. I guess, honestly, I can do that myself. Really wouldn't be that hard for me to. I think I'm going to do that. Yeah, so, yeah, if it were me, I would have put some of this nice wire braid all the way up just so that it's covered. Yeah, I think it looks, I mean, it's not bad. It's just not what I would have did. Other than some sleeving that could have been done a little better. Not better, just differently. It's done very well. You know, I'm not knocking the product for how it's done. It's just, if you're a little OCD like a lot of people are that do this kind of thing, that might bother you a little bit. Just the fact that it's not sleeved all the way up. This isn't too big of a deal because this will be hidden. This will be up under the intake, so I'm not too worried about that. They do recommend that this module be mounted to the firewall because this does work as a heat sink. I'm not sure if this is sticky tape or if it's actual, like, looks like it's a sticky tape. They say this works as a heat sink, so I'm not quite sure why there's sticky tape there. But I'll probably make a nice bracket to mount this to. So yeah, before I move on to putting this in the car, I'm going to go ahead and pull these apart and add some sleeving. Just because, like I said, I am a little anal about some things, and I don't want that exposed wire. Just doesn't look good to me. There you go. This, I mean, it's a minor thing, but you know, there's the lead with a little bit of shrink tube on it and a little bit of wire mesh versus the just exposed lead one. You know, it just looks cleaner. You know, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. You don't need to see the whole process. That's here or there. All right, so with these plugs, you're supposed to remove, that's weird. You're supposed to remove these tips here in order for them to fit inside of the coil. They're really hard to get off. I really wish that they would have just removed them, like Fab 9 would just go through and remove them, because this is like, I don't know, it's kind of sketchy taking these things off. All right, Now we can go ahead and drop the coils in. Like I said, with these coils, there's a little O-ring on them, and you're just going to slide them down low, and then as you slide it into the hole, slide the ring up. You should be able to hear the coil actually engage with the spark plug. Like so. Here's the easy part. So now for the hard part, which is figuring out where to mount this and addressing the wiring on this guy. So here we are, got the coils in the block. Pretty easy part. So as I said before, this kit was meant for a Miata. So this module was intended to be mounted to the firewall. So obviously in the Miata, the engine is in a longitudinal configuration, and the firewall would be about here. So this cable would be more than long enough to actually mount it to the firewall and tuck it away. And since this is on a front-wheel drive application, unfortunately, well, not unfortunate that it's front-wheel drive application, but just since whatever. So anyway, since this is on a front-wheel drive application, unfortunately this cable isn't long enough to really reach anywhere where I wanted to put this. My original intent was to mount it somewhere in the frame rail on the driver's side, or maybe on the firewall, but it really won't reach to the firewall. So it's looking like my best bet is going to be somewhere up under this intake, probably under this battery box here. Yeah, I'm thinking under the battery box will end up being the best place to mount this. They say that, like I said, it's important that it gets mounted to the firewall because helps act as a heat sink for this guy. But I'm thinking if I make a bracket out of like some cold rolled steel or something and just mount it to that, and then mount that bracket like somewhere up under the battery box. I think what I'm going to do here is remove the battery and probably move this intake out of the way, just to make it easy to see what I have to work with. Alright, so as I was saying earlier, the factory harness doesn't have a secondary ignition input or output. I guess it would be output. So anyways, so I have to run this line to the ECM. Basically what I did was I had a spare harness, and I pulled a pin out of the ECU connector and soldered this to a new line, so this way I can just plug this right into the factory connector and into the Megasquirt. I believe I already have the Megasquirt wired for dual ignition, for dual outputs. I don't quite remember, so I should probably pull that out and take a look at it. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and run this through the firewall and get this plugged into the connector in the proper location. I'm going to choose, forget the actual socket number, but it's the pin directly below where the factory ignition output is. It's an empty socket, and on the Miatas, it's actually, that socket below is actually the second ignition output, so why not put it there? Alright, so basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to crack this open real quick, make sure I have it configured make sure I have it configured the way I think I have it configured. This is a DIY plug and play. So basically it's a plug and play unit, but you have to put it together. So it's just a standard, it's not a Mega Squirt 2, it's based off of a micro squirt unit. And trying to think of the best way to pull this apart. Yeah, so it's based off of a micro squirt. And basically what you have is a daughter board that the micro squirt plugs into. I guess I can just show you rather than sitting here blabbing about it. Alright, so like I said, basically it's a micro squirt unit with a daughter board that the micro squirt plugs into, and then you have a breakout board that you route all your outputs from the Mega Squirt to this breakout board, and this breakout board is the factory harness connector. So that's what makes it plug and play. Once it's all done, all you gotta do is plug your factory harness in and you're good to go. You don't have to make a new harness. I think I plugged in, I got ignition 1, ignition 2, so yes, I did indeed plug in the ignition. But anyways, so yeah, then there's two little ignition outputs. So basically what I've just been using is the one, but when I wired this together, I went ahead and I wired the ignition from the header to the breakout board. So we got 1G and 1H, and 1H is ignition 2 output. So basically all I have to do is take that wire I ran, plug that into the harness in the 1H position, and then I'll have my second ignition output to fire the, you know, to run the wasted spark setup. But yeah, other than that, just need to go ahead and get that wire hooked up and then be ready to go. Alright, so here is the cable or the wire with the pin attached that I've passed through the firewall. This is the connector that I need. The pin that I'm going for is 1H, I believe. So it should be this guy. And it's not occupied because in the factory harness, like I said, this one isn't used. For the Miata, however, this is occupied. So that's why I chose that, just to keep things somewhat consistent. But yeah, you can see, obviously there's no wire in there. So my goal is, yeah, that should work. I guess I should make sure it's all fished around through all this stuff. There we go. Now that should just slide right in there. There we go. And there she is. And then locks back shut. So yeah, this is the line that was run through the firewall. This will be used to drive the second input on the igniter, I guess is what you call it. What do they really call it? Igniter. I don't know. The ignition box. Alright, so now comes the part where we wire the coil controller or coil module, or that's what they actually call it. Let's see what they coil driver. There we go. All right, so now comes a point where we wire up the coil driver to the vehicle. So this is pretty simple wiring. We have a power lead. So this needs to be hooked to a switched 12-volt source, a pretty substantial one. Wherever your factory ignition gets its 12 volts from is probably good enough. So that's what I'll be wiring mine to. So switch 12 volt. You have a ground, and then you have your two coil wires. So like I said, this is wired in wasted spark, so that's why there's only two. Coils 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 are wired together. So 1 and 4 will fire as a pair, and 2 and 3 will fire as a pair. So as far as wiring goes, like I said, pretty simple. You either switched 12 volt and the ground, and then these two, so coil 1 is the green wire, or coil 1 and 4 is the green wire, coil 2 and 3 is this brown wire. So the way this will be wired is, if you're doing this on a Miata, you're going to have two coils instead of one, and you're going to have a long, kind of a wide plug. And in fact, they actually send you instructions on what that looks like, you know, for this application. So this is the plug that will be present for the Miata. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that green wire that's going to go to coil 1 and 4, and the red wire, or the brown wire, will go to coils 3 and 4. The brown wire will go to coil 2 and 3. You could either splice the wires in this case, or the easy thing to do would be to go ahead and crimp some like spade connectors on there that are thin enough to fit into this plug here, to this harness. You can just slide it in and zip tie it and tape it up, and that would probably work. Hard wiring it would probably be the better choice, meaning going back to the harness and actually tapping in to the actual harness. So, like I said, this was a Miata. You'd be connecting this one to coil 1 and 4, and this one to coil 2 and 3. So since this isn't a Miata, this is a distributor setup, means I only have one signal line coming from the ECM, and that is this green and white wire here. So what I had to do was I had to go to the ECM and basically run a line from the ECM for the second coil. So anyways, like I said, here's the factory coil driver right here in this plug. So this one tells the coil when to fire. This is the output from the coil that goes to the coil, or this is the output from the driver, this yellow wire here, this yellow and green wire, and that goes up in here into this plug that goes to this coil. So ECM says fire the coil, this sends a ground to this guy, field collapses, and spark shoots out of that hole. Not exactly, but you know, close enough for this purpose. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cannibalize this harness here. This blue wire here is the switched 12 volt. So this switched 12 volt is going to go to this blue switched 12 volt. Is going to go to this red wire for the FAB9 coil driver. Ground, I'm probably going to just connect a ring terminal to and ground it straight to the chassis, just to make sure I get the absolute best ground I can get. And this green and white wire will go to this green wire, and then this wire I ran from the ECM, this brown wire, will go to the FAB9 brown wire. And then we should be ready to go. should be ready to give it a test start after I get it all back together. This capacitor is basically, it's a line to ground capacitor. It's basically, it's there just to help drown out noise from the ignition system. That's all it is. It's just a line to ground capacitor. It's exactly what it is. I don't know, maybe I will keep it. I want to remove this whole bracket. I want to get rid of this, you know, just help clean the bay up ever so slightly. So I guess I could relocate this somewhere else. But for now, I'll just completely disconnect it. So yeah, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to sheave this. Alright, so I'm just about ready to start wiring this stuff up. I decided I'm just going to go ahead and tap into one of the grounds that are already here because, I don't know, this makes it easier. I'm already going to be soldering, so it's easier for me to do that than it is to put a ring terminal, but I'm going to check the ground, make sure it is in fact a ground. Yep, so we got continuity and pretty good bonding there. So off of the Fab 9 coil driver, we got 4 wires, well 3 wires technically, but 4 wires in this case. So we've got a 12 volt switch, ground, ignition signal 1, ignition signal 2. So this one will drive coils coils 1 and 4. This one will drive coils 2 and 3. But so, like I said, in this case, tapping on to this. Alright, and the brown wire will go to this brown wire. That gets really gummy when it gets hot. Harbor Freight wiring at its best. Put a piece of heat shrink on there before I. So we'll slice those two. So this brown wire is, once again, this is the wire I ran coming from the ECM. Okay. So then we have our ground. Now we'll get it spliced in right here. And then our power. That's going to go on this big honkin' blue wire right here. So I could just cut those connectors off and splice that in directly, and it'll be a lot cleaner of an install, but I want to, I kind of like the idea of it remaining somewhat factory-like. Easy reversion if I ever have to. that's all done. Go ahead and just zip tie all this together. This will just all be tucked up under the battery box where no one will ever see it. Alright, got the battery box back in. So, like I said, temporarily, what I'm probably going to do is just end up mounting this up under the battery box. It's the best option I have right now. And then I'll figure something better out later. Anyways, that should be good enough for a test fire. Alright, so before we try and start the car, we've got to change some settings in Tuner Studio. Like I said, if this was, or as I was saying before, if this was like a Miata installation, you could do this on the stock ECM, or if you're using an aftermarket ECM, it's probably already set up correctly. But since this is a car going from a distributor, setup to a coil unplug setup to a wasted spark setup, there are some changes that need to be made in the ignition options. So go to ignition options. All right, so where this differs from the Miata is the number of coils, obviously. Right now it's at the single coil. I need to change it to wasted spark. So yeah, I don't know how well you can see any of that. So some changes need to be made going from a distributor setup to a coil unplug or wasted spark setup. Is I need to go from single coil to wasted spark. And I think my dwell settings might be alright, but I'm going to go ahead and revert them to spark duration. I don't see that. 0.07. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the factory Miata settings. Normal dwell, maximum dwell 4.5. I guess that's normal dwell. Cranking dwell, cranking advance. That should all be pretty good. So we'll go ahead, we'll burn those settings, and then we'll try and give her a start. All right, so had a little accident there. Not really an accident. Basically, when I first tried to start the car, it was only running on 2 cylinders. Surprising, it actually ran on 2 cylinders. Normally the car, I mean, if it's missing 1 cylinder, it'll stall. But yeah, so it was only firing on 1 and 4. So what I determined that had happened, that pin that I had put into the harness, the socket was a little wider than it should have been, so I just had to close that up. It wasn't making contact with the, well, yeah, the socket I put into the harness wasn't making contact with the pin on the ECU. So I just had to open that up a little bit, or close that up a little bit, and yeah. So first real start. First one was just a dry run. So runs. So of course what I need to do now is I need to check the timing, make sure that it's actually running correctly. Yeah, after that, warm her up and take her for a test drive, but probably won't do that tonight. It's pretty late. I'm pretty hungry. So yeah, it's like 10 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet, so yeah, I'm just go ahead and call it there. The only real reason for running, oh my God. So the main benefit to running a wasted spark, fucking trash is coming. We'll just wait for the trash guy. Let's watch him destroy my trash can again. Quiet on the set.